everybody for your patience and waiting for this with the interruptions we've had. But once again, thank you. Um, Thank you all for joining us for the question and answer session for the Mobile Source Emissions Reduction Grant Request for Proposals. My name is Matthew Hoskins. I am joined today by Sheila Blanchard, an environmental program consultant who's in charge of the North Carolina State DARA program. So a few housekeeping rules before we get started. All attendees will be muted during the webinar. Questions can be submitted into the Q&A box and will be addressed during the question and answer time at the end if they're not covered in the presentation. The raise hand feature will be disabled until the question and answer time and will only be considered for those who called into the webinar by phone. So if we have anybody calling in, you can press *3 to raise your hand, and pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit their questions. Also, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on the DAQ website at a later date. And finally, we have just over an hour and a half scheduled for this webinar. If we complete everything and answer all the questions with some time to spare, we do have the option to adjourn early. If we are not able to answer all the questions by the end of our time, we will let you know how to reach out and get your questions to us. So with that, I'll now hand it over to Sheila Blanchard for today's presentation. Sheila?
All right, thank you, Matthew. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us at this webinar. Hopefully we can clear up any questions that you have about the RFP itself, and questions about whether your project is eligible, whether you as an entity is eligible, all that other stuff. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so what to expect today? Today we're going to go over the Mobile Source Emissions Reduction Grant RFP. We're going to talk about a lot of the stuff that is in that document that you can find on the website for your reference. All of these links will be active when you download this presentation. So for reference, every time anything that you might need to know about the program, you can find on our website here. This website is specific to the 2023 release of the RFP. It has the information about what the program's about from the EPA. It has the request for proposal. It has the timeline. It has the DARA eligibility tool, as well as these webinars that we're having. And then, oh, sheesh. Okay. Can you see it now? Okay, well, if you just go to this link, you'll be able to see everything that I was just talking about, and it's right there on this website. So today we're going to talk about the overview of the program, the eligibility, so who is eligible, what vehicles are eligible, how to get access to our grant management system. I'll be referring to this as the GMS throughout the presentation. The grant management system is what you're going to use for application. It's what you're going to use to upload documents in case of award. It's what you're going to use to engage with the agreement and the contract process. You're also going to use it to file claims. So this is, once you make friends with the system, you're going to make friends with it for the whole duration of the grant. So it's important that that your organization has somebody that does have access to the system. So this is the first step to being able to apply for this grant. We're going to go over where to find information after this workshop, and then we're going to address some of your questions and answers. We split this webinar up into 2 different webinars for this RFP. This webinar, like I said, will go over the actual RFP. The next webinar will go over how to apply, and this would be the nuts and bolts of using the grant management system, of bringing the information, uploading the documents into the grant management system, what kinds of things are going to be scored in the application, how to write application essays, things like that. So that will be more of the nitty-gritty of the application itself. And that's going to happen January 10th, 2024. If you are familiar with the GMS or you want to apply early, all of the information that will be in that webinar is going to be on this webpage. So you can go ahead and start that process if you'd like. And you can always contact us if you're ready to go, and we'll walk you through it as well. Okay, first things first about this grant program. This is a reimbursement program for diesel equipment upgrades and replacement. That means your organization has to pay for the equipment and then submit a claim to us for reimbursement of that equipment. There are mandatory cost shares for almost all project types. The cost shares are dependent upon what kind of fuel your replacement vehicle is using. It depends on the type of project. We have a big table. They're very different. They're not easy to determine which cost share you would be eligible for, but we can help walk you through that. And the eligibility tool that's found online, at the end of that, when you put in your information, it will give you what cost share that your organization will be responsible for. Existing diesel equipment must be scrapped. When you replace something, you must scrap that equipment. Scrappage is a very specific requirement. We'll talk about what that means so you know what you're getting into when you have to get rid of that equipment. At the very least, it's the engine block itself has to be destroyed. The chassis has to be sawn through. For engine replacements, the engine has to be destroyed, things like that. For DERA, and this is different than the Volkswagen programs, you must scrap the replaced equipment within 3 months of taking delivery of the new equipment. EPA is very strict about this. So once you take delivery of that new equipment, you should get the scrappage process going. Just to give you an idea of the timeline, we released this RFP November 1st, so it's been out about a month. The RFP is going to close February 2nd, so we have a 90-day RFP period. In February and March of next year, we'll evaluate the applications. In April, we'll notify our applicants whether they've received the grant. We'll begin processing contracts in April and May. This RFP is different than the previous ones in that EPA has moved over to a 2-year cycle, which is great. So you have a little bit more time to complete this project. All projects that are funded under this RFP must be completed by September 30th, 2026. And that includes all paperwork, all the claim, the final reports, all that should be submitted as well by September 30th, 2026. There's over $1.1 million that we at the state level at North Carolina are funding, so that can fund quite a few projects with these cost shares. Okay, so who may apply? Any private or public sector entity that is stationed in North Carolina or it's not really that they are stationed in North Carolina, but their equipment does most of their, if not all of their duty cycle in North Carolina, are eligible to apply. On our website, we do have a list of the types of funding, the types of projects that we have funded through this program. We do everything from lawnmowers to marine vessel engine replacements. The thing that is most important about this is that it is replacing diesel equipment, not gasoline, not any other equipment, but if there's something takes diesel, it's likely to be able to be replaced under the DERA program. So for example, a lot of the things that we have replaced: school buses, any vehicle that transports students to and from student and student-related activities would be eligible. Transit buses, paratransit, heavy-duty, medium-duty trucks, marine engines, locomotives, and then a lot of the vast gamut of non-road engines that are used in various sectors are all eligible for replacement under this RFP. Just to give you an idea of the funding limits and the cost shares that are responsive, that the fleet owner are responsible. Here's an example, and there's not a ton of patterns to be found here, so you'll probably have to just keep referring to this table. In general, for a diesel to diesel replacement, DERA will fund up to 25% of that. For replacement with a CARB certified low NOx engine, DERA will give you up to 35% for the replacement of that vehicle. Low NOx engines are typically those that are CNG or natural gas powered. Almost all, if not most, if not all of those are in the CARB certification list. You can find that low NOx engine, and it's usually stamped right on the engine plate when you order the vehicle for say a propane vehicle, because almost all of them are considered low NOx engines. You can get up to 35%. Zero emission, these are battery ZEVs as well as off the grid vehicles. We can fund up to 45% of the new vehicle as well as the infrastructure for powering this equipment. And then once you get to engine replacement as opposed to vehicle replacement, you get a slight increase in the funding limits, mainly because those projects are a little bit less expensive. Some of the things that we will pay 100% on are things like retrofits, highway idle reduction technologies, exhaust after treatment. There's a lot of rules about how these can work, and typically we can't do this on anything that's newer than 2007. So really, a lot of those engines have been cycled out of the population. But if you do have some of these engines that are older than 2007, then we are able to fund some of those retrofits. Additionally, there's some other special kinds of projects. At the end of the day, when you do the application, it will ask you what kind of project you're doing, and it won't allow you to put more. It won't allow you to ask for more money than what you're eligible for in the application. So if you're not sure what kind of project you're doing or what some of these words mean for what exactly you're doing, you're welcome to email me, and I'll tell you what kind of project it is and what you should put in that application. There's no one size fits all here. All of these projects are different, so just let us know. And there's a lot of rules depending on what kinds of projects you're doing. So that's what we're here, is to guide through and make sure that your project is eligible before you apply. Once again, like I said, I built the DERA eligibility tool. This is generally a question and answer form that you can answer the questions, and it will work you towards the specific project that you may be eligible for. It'll ask you whether something is on road or off road. It'll ask you whether you want to replace with an electric or replace with a diesel, things like that. So take a look at that. We did have a question today. The first question in the tool is about electrified parking spaces. Electrified parking spaces are a specific project that has to do with giving tractor trailers a hoteling space. So it allows for electricity to be used instead of diesel to run a cabin, where someone's hanging out or sleeping. So that's not EVSE infrastructure. No funds in this RFP can be used for standalone electric vehicle equipment infrastructure. You can ask for funding to support clean heavy duty vehicle replacements. Okay, the most basic criteria: the replacement vehicle must be of the same weight and class of the original vehicle. We call this like for like. So your new vehicle that you're asking for should be able to complete the same duty cycle as your old vehicle. We can go down. You can get something that is of lower weight class, than the original vehicle, but you can't procure something that's a higher weight class than the original vehicle that you will scrap. Additionally, all vehicles and equipment must have at least 3 years of useful life remaining. This means that if you did not replace it with this grant, you would be using it for at least 3 years after the date of award. This is just this is a fleet certification thing. We check a box on the application, and then once you submit your stuff for the claim you that we send to the EPA, you sign that the vehicle did in fact have 3 years of useful life. The original equipment must be operational. It must still be working. It has to still be doing its diesel cycle, its duty cycle. This is a mitigation program. So what we're trying to do is get those diesel fumes off of the road and replace it with newer, cleaner equipment. Additionally, North Carolina, these must be operating in North Carolina for up to 70% of their time, and it has to do that for the next 5 years. So you're not able to buy a piece of equipment and then sell it or send it somewhere else. It must be in North Carolina. Okay, so we only replace class 5 trucks or larger. Anything smaller than that isn't eligible. The on-road vehicles must be diesel powered. Once again, we will not replace any other fuel types besides diesel. No gasoline, no CNG, nothing like that. You can have horsepower increases for non-road equipment. This has changed. It used to be 25%. For this RFP, it has to be less than 40%. Something has to do a lot with the engine efficiency that's coming out in the production lines right now. So this has been responsive to that. The original on-road vehicles must, okay, so this is one of the requirements. They must get at least 7,000 miles per year. There's no wiggle room on this. We can't, you know, you can submit 2 vehicles to be replaced by one if you can't get to that 7,000 miles, but it must do that kind of mileage every year. Agricultural pumps similarly must operate at least 250 hours per year, and then non-road engines, say like a genset or some other kind of non-road engine, has to operate for 500 hours per year or more to be eligible for replacement. Okay, scrappage. We get a lot of our questions about scrappage. Scrappage is to render the old vehicle inoperable. You can recycle it. You can blow it up if that's what you want to do. You could shoot it. We've had some folks try to shoot it. But the specific definition is that the engine block must have at least a 3-inch hole cut into the engine block, and the chassis frame rails must be completely sawn through and disabled. So we have I'll show you some pictures in the next few slides that show you what that looked like. This was a big part of the Volkswagen program. This is a big part of DERA. There are folks around that if you look at our previous projects, or if you look at the Volkswagen project list, you will see the scrappage is something that folks are becoming more familiar with. So it is something that you can get someone to do. You can also do this in-house as long as you document all of these parts of the scrappage process. Once again, I'll say this: you must scrap the replaced equipment within 3 months of taking delivery of the new equipment. Some examples here. We have this nice tidy 3-inch hole. So they're not always this tidy, and sometimes they're square and things like that. But this is essentially what we're looking for. We're looking to make sure that engine is never ever going to be able to hold the pressure that it would require to combust. And then the chassis, similarly, there's no way this chassis is ever going to be reconstructed to Frankenstein any of these vehicles back into the world. So that's what we're looking for. That's what EPA is looking for. So make sure that you know that scrappage is the only way you will get reimbursed for your new equipment. Okay, so there are a bunch of steps that you have to go through in order to actually get to the application. The application is open right now in the grants management system. So if you already have access, you can take a look at that application. And like I said, in the next webinar, we're going to go through the specific parts of the application and what you're going to put into those fields in the GMS. But for now, we have to kind of get most of these folks into the system. And I'll talk a little bit more about where you can, there's example applications online on that web page that I tried to show you but failed at. There's sample documents online. So really everything that you would need to be able to submit an application is there right now. So you don't have to wait for the next webinar, but it's there right now. But we're going to try, the first things first, we're going to try and get everybody into the system. So you must have an NCID to request access to the grants management system. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This is the overview, and then we're going to go through what all this looks like. If you already have an NCID, which you may if you're a state or government employee, you may have it, or even a local employee, you may already have an NCID. If you have applied to this program before, if you applied to any of the Volkswagen programs, you already have an NCID if you have access to the grant management system. But if you don't have an NCID, you will have to get one of those. That can take a little bit of time. If you have an NCID, you will go to the request access form that we have online. So you will go to the Enterprise Business Service Access Request application. This is a form that is housed on our website. You will complete a substitute W-9, and then you will email it to this website here. And then when you receive this email, welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System. This means that you can get into the grants management system, and then you can apply. Just so you know, this can take up to a week or more. So if it's February 1st and you have not received access to the GMS, there is nothing we can do. So if you want to apply to this grant, I would recommend you do this sooner than later. I would recommend you do it after this webinar, if not right now during this webinar, in order if you know that you're going to apply for this grant. Getting an NCID, so if you're familiar with the NCID system, this is what it looks like. What you're going to do is you're going to set yourself up as an individual. You're essentially going to be set up as an individual that will have ties to the organization of the W-9 that you've sent in. So we have some instructions on how to create an NCID. Your NCID should be your first name and last name, or one if it's used, or something like that. It shouldn't be anything really made up. These are going to be the credentials that you use to get into the GMS system. One thing about the relationship between the NCID and the W-9 is that if you are say a contractor or a consultant who is working on behalf of an organization, you are going to need to get that organization you're going to send an email. That organization is going to have to send an email that says this person can access our entity account in the grants management system. So that's an extra step if you happen to be a consultant or outside of the organization. Okay, so we want our NCIDs to be a certain format. If it's not in this format, it will get denied. Usually it's the first name or initial, the middle initial, the last name, and a number if that is already, so you could do Sheila Blanchard 1 or SJ Blanchard 2 or something like that. Whatever that may be, it should be something like that. So we have our Wile E. Coyote options here. So you have lots of options. Do not put your company or organization name. This is your NCID. This is not your entities. This is nobody else. Once we get you affiliated with the organization in the grants management system or in the EBS system, then you and up to 2 other people affiliated with that system can log in and edit the application, can upload information, can do all the stuff that we need you to do. Okay, so you have your NCID, now what? Now you're gonna go into the grant management system access. You're gonna request access to the GMS. The one thing that you need to know, the agency is gonna be the DAQ, okay? And then you're gonna fill out this information. You're going to put the organization that you're affiliated with, that you're applying on behalf of, et cetera, the tax address for that organization, the city, the state, all of this is going to be what's going to tie your application to the organization that we are also putting into our GMS. Select roles and actions. I think this is submit claims or something like that. Hopefully you'll have no problem with this form. You will submit this. It will go to our EBS folks, and then they will send you an email once you're in the system that says welcome to the EBS system. Additionally, when concurrently while you're applying for this, you will have to send the state North Carolina substitute W-9 to this DAQ MSCB NCDAQ grants email. This is the service email for the DERA grants. You're going to have to send this. This is not the federal W-9. This is the North Carolina substitute W-9. If you're in the GMS webpage, or if you're on the DERA webpage, we have links to all of these forms that you need. This is a fillable form, so go ahead and fill it out, and then you send it along to this email. Like I said, each organization is allowed up to 3 authorized users. You don't have to have 3, but it might be nice to have a backup in case you're on vacation for Christmas or something. We will use this. Everything, almost all of our communication, all of our data requests, if you have to amend the application, is going to go through the GMS, and as well as the claims, as well as everything from the beginning and end of this grant. So the person that gets access to the GMS needs to be, when they leave, they need to tell us first off so we can get someone else in there. But that's the person that's going to be responsible from the beginning to the end of this project. So you kind of have to stay in the GMS. We have this date here. If you have not requested access by January 19th, which is approximately 10 days from the close of the RFP, we cannot guarantee that you will be able to submit an application. So keep this date in mind, and try and get all of this kind of like red tape stuff done well before you're ready to submit an application. Towards the end of the RFPs, it's really terrible to have to tell people that they're just too late and there's nothing we can do. So we would prefer not to do that. This is the W-9 form. Like I said, it's fillable. This is you're not going to put your social security. This is going to be the tax ID of the organization, and then who you are and your affiliation to this organization. So if you have any questions, just let us know and we'll help you out with that form. This is what the portal to the grant management system, this is what it looks like. So once you get your NCID and password, this is what you will use to log on. Passwords expire every 90 days, so you have to kind of keep changing them. The same thing has happened here. If you have an expired password through NCID, it won't let you in, so you'll have to go back to NCID, change your password, then come back here to log in. But yeah, once you have that, you've been granted access, that's what you'll use to get in. This portal, the link to this portal is also on our grant website. So there's also a user manual. There's a webinar on that page that tells you how to use the GMS, how to get into the GMS. If you want to go out on your own, you should be able to find all the information you need about going in and using the GMS. We have a user manual if you're more of a text person. So lots of resources to kind of help guide you through this GMS process. So you're in the GMS, yay. You're in the GMS, this is what you're going to see. What you're going to see is a tile, and it's going to say DAQ grants or something like that. That's what you're going to go in, and then it's going to send you to what I would call this is the landing page. So the landing page is where you're going to see all of the stuff that you can do. You can create a new application, which is what you're going to be doing when you apply to this application or apply to this RFP. Create a new claim, which is what you're going to do when you want your money. View applications, which is what you'll do when you've submitted your application and it's going through the process. View agreements, which is what you'll do when you want to look at the contract and the agreement that we've created and the money and stuff like that, et cetera, et cetera. So edit claims, if we send it back to you. Edit application, if we have to send the application back to you for any reason, you're going to go into edit application. So this is where all the magic happens. So once you're in the system and once you create your application, there will be another thing here that shows you some other information about what you've done. Basically your recent items, things like that. So before we get into the nitty-gritty about the application portal itself, there's a lot of documentation that you have to collect right now in order to apply. So the way that we've set up these webinars is that I'm telling you what you need to get for your application and getting you into the system and getting you all ready. And then for the next webinar, you'll bring all of this information with you and I'll show you how to include it in your application, how to upload it, and how to use the checklist to make sure you have everything for a complete application so you won't get rejected or you won't get denied funding because you don't have a complete application. So we do have a checklist of what is required, not only in the RFP itself, but also on the website under application requirements, application checklist. So if you want to print that out and refer to it, that might be helpful. The first thing that you're going to need is the DAQ vehicle spreadsheet. This is an Excel spreadsheet that is going to give us all of the information we need to do the emissions analysis for your application. I'm going to show you what that looks like in the next few slides. We need quotes. This is itemized quotes for all equipment. So this would include itemized quotes for your new vehicle, your infrastructure if you're asking for it, your install if you're doing if you're putting in a new engine or something like that. So these should be itemized for everything that you're getting. We also really like those spec those spec documents that are often sent with new equipment. Those are really helpful for us to kind of compare the old equipment with the new equipment, which leads me to the next thing we need. Those of you out in the heavy duty sector or the off-road sector know that there are lots of different words for lots of different kinds of equipment. So we discovered that we really needed to get pictures of the original equipment so that we could do the emissions analysis appropriate. So please give us a good picture of the equipment that you want to replace, as well as those engine tags, so we can get that metadata on the tier, the emissions tier of the engine, the year of the engine, stuff like that, that those engine tags will tell us, and the VINs. Okay, so we know, so that at the end of the claim, we see that the VIN of your scrapped one is the VIN that you submitted. Additionally, any other supporting documentation for the application. If you're a city or township, you may have to have some kind of documentation that it's in your budget. If it's anything like that, that would help your application you would submit to. So EV requests, because they're a little bit different, require extra attachments. So if you're just doing a diesel to diesel or a CNG for a diesel replacement, you don't have to pay attention to the next slide. You could go get some coffee or something. But the EV requests are going to require quite a few more extra attachments. The first thing the EV projects need is an acknowledgement of a consultation with a utility. This is because these projects are a little bit difficult to install. They require different kinds of powering and structuring. And so utility, knowing that you've talked to a utility, lets us know that you're prepared to move with this project at a time that is acceptable for this grant. This sometimes the not acknowledging or consulting with the utility has led to serious backlogs and the ability to get these projects done. So we want to know that you know what you're getting into with these EV projects. So we look for that consultation. Sometimes that's a letter. Sometimes that's, you know, your utility is giving you a quote for what it would take to get the power to the area, anything like that. Additionally, you're going to need those quotes for infrastructure. If you're not requesting infrastructure as part of your grant, say you just decided to get the vehicle and not request infrastructure, you don't have to include the infrastructure. But we will have to see that the vehicle itself or the equipment itself is powerable before we can reimburse your claim. Even if we didn't, we just have to make sure you can turn it on and use it. So if you are requesting infrastructure, we need an installation quote and an equipment quote. And you know, if you consult with somebody about infrastructure, these are standard. You won't have any problem getting these. So there are some extra requirements in this RFP and in the DARE program in general that are new this year as a result of the Infrastructure Act. And these are the Build America, Buy America requirements that are only applicable to infrastructure. These are not applicable to the electric vehicles that are being procured under these grant programs. It is only applicable to any associated infrastructure. And unfortunately, we do not have a lot of guidance on how this can be implemented. It is possible that the vendors are going to have some kind of stamp or some kind of way that they let you, the procurers, know that these are BABA, that they are, you know, are fulfilling these BABA requirements. But as of yet, we don't have a ton of guidance on how we're going to know whether the infrastructure is compliant or whether the production is compliant. So stay tuned. We're hoping to have a little bit of clarification on that in the next couple of months. If you do have one of these EV projects with the infrastructure, I encourage you to please just contact me directly so we can start this conversation about how we're going to make this work. For electric projects as well, there's also an acknowledgement of workforce development. Essentially, this is that you're not displacing people in the workforce for the electric vehicles. And then any other supporting documentation for the application. So this is what our new electric vehicle replacement vehicle spreadsheet looks like. It is a spreadsheet. It is in Excel. So as you can see, this is the example that we have online right now. You can just clear this and then put in your information. So what we're looking for, the things that are most important are, you want to fill out everything that you can. We have to know the class. We have to know the target fleet. We have to know what city and what zip code. We have to know all of this metadata. All of this can help us put this into the diesel emissions quantifier. So fill out all of this so we know what vehicle you're trying to replace. We need this VIN. We need your amount of fuel that you use every year. We need the mileage traveled every year. These vehicles, these spreadsheets, there are 5 different tabs that correspond to the different projects, the different types of project that are eligible under this RFP. Okay, so now if you're going cross tab in one application, you can't do that. Don't do it. Okay, the application won't let you do that. So if you have more than one sheet, if you're putting in information for more than one sheet in the spreadsheet, that means you have to do another application, a separate application for on-road and off-road. Okay. So if you have, say, a fleet of 5 vehicles for on-road, you can put all of those units in here, put in the information for the units. We'll run those emissions, and that's how you'll score your points in the application or in the selection process. So like I said, there are 5 tabs. There's on-road, there's off-road. This is anything that isn't registered to be on-road. Gensets, any kind of like non-road diesel equipment. Marine, I think that's fairly obvious, you know, boats, locomotive, also choo-choo. And then infrastructure, this is the only exception where you would have a tab that is in the same, like a second tab for your on-road or off-road. I'm not sure if they're a marine or locomotive infrastructure equipment, but this is where you would put the infrastructure for any of these affiliated vehicles or equipment that would require infrastructure. This is considered an attachment. This is not something that you do in the application. You can upload this attachment at any point while you're doing the application. If you do not fill out everything, we will send it back. It will be considered an incomplete application. If you have any questions about what to fill in here, just call us up and we'll tell you what to put in there. So really do the best you can to get all of these fields filled in. This is the top of the spreadsheet. The bottom of the spreadsheet is different. This is what you replace it with. Granted, you may not know all of this, so you're not going to know the VIN, so TBD is fine. This is how much the total cost of the replacement is. Then it's going to be like how much you're requesting per vehicle. It's going to calculate that cost share for you, whatever that is. And then whatever these engineers, some of this you may not know the family name, but you're going to know the fuel type, obviously. Some of these things are not going to change. So fill that out the best you can. A lot of times, if you say you don't know what the new fuel volume is, say you're going from diesel to CNG, a lot of times we can do those conversions for you, and do, you know, the efficiency increases and stuff like that for that fuel use, as long as we have the original fuel use and we are assuming a like for like replacement. Okay, so another thing is that the quotes, these quotes that you get for this project should match the information found in the spreadsheet. You're welcome to round up to an even number. I'm fine with that. It should not be like way out of the field for the quotes. Additionally, for infrastructure, the quotes should match the installation and equipment. You can figure in, you know, a few percentage points for inflation if you like, depending on how long you think it'll take for you to complete this project. But additionally, what is in this spreadsheet is what you will be considered for funding and awarding if we award you. Okay, so once again, you can upload attachments anytime during the application process. Okay, so some things to know. I realize I've been talking a lot and talking a lot at you. Increases in fleet size are not allowed. So there's no, you have to destroy something and then buy something. It's always like for like. You can do like for something smaller if you like, but you can never change up the equipment. The equipment must be able to do the original duty cycle of the replaced equipment. Your budget information should be as accurate as possible. Remember, we do, some of our criteria is about cost effectiveness. So you don't want to explode those costs because it may decrease your competitiveness in the application pool. So you really want to get that as close to what you think it will be as possible. We may choose to award partial funding. If you know, if you get an award letter and it says this may be partially, we only will award a few vehicles out of a multi-vehicle project, or we may only give you 20% of a diesel to diesel replacement. This can look a lot of ways. You never have to accept an award. You can always say I don't want this award. There's so just so you know that it's possible. We do have some essays in the application that tell us where you tell us about the project. You tell us why you're interested in this project or why you want to make this particular move in your fleet, who it's going to affect, et cetera, et cetera. So when we have projects that score similarly in the emissions and in some of the other criteria that we look at, that's where we look at the essays to kind of say, okay, well, this person's had a couple of projects that are really successful. It looks like they're moving towards a fleet transition. And so some of those might be favorable ways to increase your competitiveness or your potential to get funding under this RFP. You have to submit applications to the grants management system. We will not accept applications any other way. We will not accept emails. They must be submitted in that grant. You must push that submit button on before 11:59 p.m. February 2nd, 2024. This is a big one. Don't sign any agreements with vendors or start work until your contract is fully executed. This is a North Carolina contract requirement. If we see that if you're submitting an application for something that's already in process, you will be rejected immediately. So you really can't begin anything until we have a fully executed contract. There are some exceptions to this, but in general, no. Because our contracting system has gotten a lot faster, so it's not taking that long. So this is just something important for you to understand. An award, getting a notification of an award is not, you can't begin starting work. You still have to wait until we execute your contract. One thing that sometimes happens, we'll get a lot of applications, and this DERA funding isn't just spread out for the state agencies. It's often spread out among other NPOs and other clean air organizations that use DERA funds to do replacement projects. So it is possible that if we have a good application pool and then some of these applications fall into these counties where some of these other opportunities are, we may share your application if it's not funded, just to kind of increase your potential for getting funded if you happen to be in one of these areas. Finally, I think I've said this twice already. Please log into the GMS periodically. Your account will be made inactive if you don't. You will have to request access again, and that can take some time. So finally, the application award is not a fully executed contract. Just to jump real quick so you kind of have an idea of what the scoring criteria are. The lifetime emissions reductions, that's what we're getting from all the data on that spreadsheet that you're submitting. Cost effectiveness is related to that data, the emissions reductions data, and how much your project costs. Co-benefits are other things that include decreases in other emissions, some other other co-benefits of the project. Environmental justice, we have a specific requirement here for how much the environmental justice part is. These are all points. You can find this in the RFP. The EPA has priority counties, which are listed down here: Cabarrus, Gaston, Airedale, Lincoln, Mecklenburg, Rowan, or Ewan. So if you're in Union, so if you're in these counties, you will get these 5 points. These in red are bonus points. Historically under-resourced county. So we have a list of counties. So if you're in those counties, if your project duty cycle is in those counties, you'll get those points. Electric projects get a bonus of 5 points. Minority or women-owned business, a bonus of 5 points. You should indicate this in the essays in your application so we know. We're not going to assume that you're a minority or women-owned business, so make sure that you indicate that in your application. And finally, EPA has added a new bonus criteria related to goods movement facility. These are places where you'll find like yard spotters and things that move tractor trailers around, and so they are places where where you see lots of goods moving around into different parts of North Carolina. So environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So this is, we just have these scores as a way to address the environmental justice component of our state application. This is the map of the historically under-resourced counties. So if your project is in one of those counties, you will get some of those bonus points. This is a list of those counties for your reference. Okay, finally, and all of this stuff we'll talk more. I will go into more in depth in the how to apply webinar so that you can really use all of the tools available to you to increase your points. So we're going to go through that. We went through that pretty fast, but that will be something that this criteria, how we score things, will be something that I'll talk about a lot more explicitly in the next webinar. Okay, some helpful hints. If you're ready to apply now, apply early. If there are issues with your application, say you wait to the last minute to submit your application, you can return it before the closing date of February 2nd, 2024. But if there are any issues with your application and we return it to you and then you don't submit it before the closing date, you will not be able to submit it again. So the sooner you can apply, the sooner we can look for any issues that are in your application that you will have to address in order for it to be evaluated. If we send it back and then you send it back without corrections, that's how it will probably be evaluated. And if it turns out it's ineligible because of it, there's not going to be really anything that you can do. So the sooner you apply, the sooner we can give you some of that input in order to have a great application. We won't accept late applications. And it's not just that we won't, the GMS itself won't. You won't be able to push that button. You won't be able to open that application. So there are no late applications. There's no way to do it. So if you need assistance, please contact us well before the application closes for assistance, and we'd be glad to help. Okay, so just so we know for next time in the How to Apply webinar, which I encourage you if it's your first time applying to the DERA grants and you haven't done a DW grant or whatever, I would recommend that you sign up for this webinar. For then, you should have requested your NCID. You should have submitted and completed and signed your W-9 form. You should have requested access to the GMS and received the welcome email. I'm running that webinar as if you are ready to go, and I'm going to walk you through how to apply. Okay, so you should also have all of your application materials needed to apply. You should have that fleet description data sheet filled out. You should have all those pictures of the equipment to be replaced. You should have all those quotes for the new equipment ready to go. And then you should have already contacted your utility company and all the stuff for the EV infrastructure. So you don't necessarily have to have it, but you should be well on your way to having all of that information so that when we do this how to apply, it's literally going to be how to apply, how to upload documents, how to fill out that field, things like that. So it's going to be a real nuts and bolts webinar. Okay, so finally, where can you get more information? You can always shoot us an email. You can shoot me an email, sheila.blanchard@deq.nc.gov. We have our GMS user manual. If you have questions about the EBS is housed in a whole other division, a whole other department. So if you're having like real weird, you can't get into the GMS, you will have to contact the EBS support folks at the DOT. So I would assume I would not wait to submit an application just in case technical difficulties happen, because we know they always do. So try and give yourself a cushion of about a week and then, or probably more, hopefully more. I would submit one tomorrow if I were you, just to make sure that you have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and that you don't have to go to EBS support to get into the system at the last minute. Finally, please subscribe to our mailing list. DERA is a multi-year grant, happens all the time, happens every year. You'll get information every year about the opening of this RFP, as well as any updates about who's been awarded and what kind of projects are happening. So subscribe to the mailing list. These are the contacts for the DERA program. Myself, Matthew, who you heard from earlier, Brian Phillips, who's the supervisor. And finally, this is a useful links. So once you download this presentation, you can go, these links are all active, and it will take you to really everything that I've referred you to today, as well as some real helpful tutorials on how to navigate the GMS. If you do have all of your stuff ready to go, there's even a how to apply, there's even a tutorial that goes through the entire application and how to submit an application. We also have past webinars on how to apply if you're ready to go jump on that, how to apply in the GMS. And then links to all of the forms required for the application and the criteria of the program. All right, I have been talking a lot. So I think that now we can start to address some of your questions. If you want to put your questions in the chat, I will do my best to answer them. So I think Matthew's going to be reading the questions to me, and I'll do my best.
Yes, thank you, Sheila. And a reminder to anybody who called in, you can press *3 to raise your hand, *3 again to lower it. And so if you raise your hand, we can call on you and unmute you so you can ask your question. For everybody else, go ahead and put your questions into that Q&A box on your screen, and we'll get to them. So for now, we have just one question in. And the question is, can vehicle dealers apply for the reimbursement on behalf of the fleet, or does the fleet itself need to be the ones to apply?
Well, you can treat that a little bit like a consultant role, where the dealers are playing a consultant role for the entity that will be owning and procuring the equipment. However, the way that our financial system works, we will be reimbursing the owner and operator of that equipment.
All right. And for now, that is the only question we have in. So, okay, here comes another one. So, can organizations that are doing business in North Carolina but have no North Carolina state tax ID, can they set up an NCID?
Okay, so one, the NCID is from the individual that is affiliated with the business who will be doing the application. So you don't need any of that information to set up the NCID. However, for the W-9 form, the W-9 form is not necessarily North Carolina specific. And Brian, if he's on the line, he can help me out. Let's go back to.
Yeah, the W-9 form is the North Carolina state substitute W-9 form, so you need your federal tax ID on that form.
So it's a federal ID that that is used by the state of North Carolina to identify you. So you would not need any kind of North Carolina affiliated stuff for that form. I hope I answered your question.
All right, Matthew, I have a question. This is from a previous webinar. Once we destroy the old diesel vehicle and provide photo evidence of the destruction, are we allowed to scrap the vehicle and keep the proceeds?
Yes. Okay. So some programs will require for you to report the scrappage. For our particular RFP, we don't. If you recycle or receive funds for that scrap metal, that's really all on you. You're welcome to do with it what you will. We don't require reporting or anything like that.
All right, we have another question here. Back to the tax ID question. So if we use a federal company tax ID, but set up the NCID as an individual on behalf of the company.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're setting the NCID up as an individual of yourself. Like this is you, your NCID that you could use for any. So if you were affiliate, say a consultant and affiliated with 3 different entities that were submitting projects, you would be able to access those in the GMS. Okay, so the NCID is for you, the individual, right? You get that NCID and then you send in the W-9 and you part of your job title is that you work for this company. Then you are then allowed to access the company, the entity, the organization's files in our GMS. And so that's essentially how that works, how that W-9, the W-9 connects the organization in the GMS, and then you become connected to that organization as an individual in order to do the application or to submit the claims on behalf of that organization.
All right, so we have a question. How many applications do we expect to receive, and how many will be funded? Kind of two-part question. Also, what is the max funding per application?
I have no idea. It could go either way. In prior years, we have had for an RFP that's about 1.1 million, we have had applications for approximately twice the amount of what we have available. So it really just depends. Sometimes we have projects that are very, very, very expensive, and so so it really just depends on the kinds of projects. As far as how much we at this point, because it is a competitive process and because the projects are so varied in the kinds of things that we can fund, there's really no way to tell how many projects or how many entities or how many vehicles will get funded. In the past, with around 1 million, we have been able to fund maybe 20 vehicles, something like that. It really just depends on the cost shares and what some of those vehicles look like and the makeup of the fleet, of the competitive fleet. As far as the limit for what an entity or an organization can apply for under this RFP, there is none. The only thing that you're limited by are by the specific cost shares that are in, and I'm gonna go up here, the specific cost shares for that project type. So for example, you know, the marine projects can be quite expensive. Locomotive projects can be quite expensive. So even at these cost shares, you can still have $400,000 or $500,000 projects. So there is no limit to how much you can apply for. I will say that because we evaluate the projects based on cost effectiveness, on the emissions benefits that we're getting from those projects. An expensive project that doesn't get a lot of emissions benefits is likely not to do well in the competitive, when we start to do all that scoring. So that's something to consider. But if you have 20 vehicles, you're looking for diesel replacement 25%, and they're old vehicles, and you want to, you can If you are asking for $340,000, that's probably going to go pretty far. That's going to be a lot of bang for the buck, right? So there's no limit on how much you can request besides those cost share requirements. And obviously we can't fund more than what we have in that 1.1 million pot.
All right, so to return to the tax ID question, they're asking, so there's no need to use our personal social security number then,
No.
just the FEIN.
Nope. Do not give us that information. That's also another reason why you send it to other people that's not us. Yeah, so none of your personal social security or if you do that, we'll pull it out of the document or redact it. What we need is the tax ID of the organization that you would be applying on behalf of. And that address, you know, their tax address, their whatever that organization's metadata is that goes into that form.
Okay, so someone here asks, for off-road equipment, i.e. forklifts and cranes, what are the restrictions as it relates to the task class and the horsepower? So, i.e. the increase in 25% horsepower increases simultaneously, increases lift capacity, or increases weight.
Ooh, for forklifts. So for that off-road equipment like that, you can't have more than a 40% horsepower increase, which I think is relative to the engine itself. It's not necessarily relative to the compression or any of the other stuff that's going on in the forklift. However, I think that with electric replacements, the horsepower increases substantially. I don't think that's necessarily an issue. And if that is what you're looking at, there are waivers and there are exceptions for those kinds of projects. But in general, for off-road, the horsepower increases of over 40% just means that you're getting like a lot bigger, a lot more of a different kind of engine than maybe what's needed for the duty cycle. So you should stay within that horsepower budget requirement. And if I didn't understand your question, I apologize. Just let me know.
All right. If we lost documentation and records of a previous DERA submission due to a personnel turnover, how can we locate prior NCID information? Do we have to resubmit?
So we're going to have to ask for some clarification there. If you're talking about prior NCID from a person that is still going to be doing the submission, then you will have to use that same NCID. However, if you had staff turnover and that person is no longer affiliated with your organization, someone on your staff will have to get their NCID and get access to the GMS.
Okay, another question here. Will we receive a submission checklist similar to the Volkswagen grants?
So I'm not sure what you mean by receiving a submission checklist. We do have an application checklist in the information that is in our how to apply page for this grant. If you submit and you are missing documents, we will certainly get back to you. That's what this time is for. You know, so if you submit early and you're missing the kind of quote that we need, or you're missing something that we've required, then we get back to you and then you submit it and then you have a complete application. So that's really what you're going to receive as far as a checklist for your application.
Yeah, on the program webpage, under the documents and workshops, there's an application drop down, and there you can download the required attachments checklist from there.
All right, so I've got another older question here from a previous one. So somebody had asked for the 2-year requirement. So there's a 2-year time period for this grant. When is that 2 years calculated? So is that when the grant is awarded or when the grant application is submitted?
Okay, so our contracts, when we do the contracts, they will go out to either 2 years from the signature of that contract or to September 30th, 2026, when all work has to be completed.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A box. I can do another one from a past one. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and submit them and we can try to get to them. So one of these questions here, how is the 3 years of remaining life determined?
That is typically up to the fleet owner who generally knows what the turnover and replacement schedule is for those vehicles. So we rely on that certification by the fleet owner that they would in fact have used that equipment for 3 years. It doesn't necessarily have to be in service to you for 3 years. If it has 3 years of remaining life in the engine, and if you resold it and you knew somebody would use it for 3 years, that would also work. What we're looking for is that engine, if it were not for this grant, would be doing its duty cycle or would be doing its job for at least 3 years.
Okay, so we got another question in the box here. Could you give a project example of an idle reduction technology that can be combined with a previously installed exhaust after treatment retrofit?
Okay, so um, could you repeat the question, Matthew?
Yeah, so they asked, could you give a project example of an idle reduction technology that can be combined with a previously installed exhaust after treatment retrofit?
Um, I mean, maybe Brian can help me out with this. Maybe an APU
Yeah, I was
would be
thinking of auxiliary
considered.
power unit.
Yeah. So, if you already have these previously, so how this works is that you must, it's almost like a tiered replacement strategy. So we would not be able to do an auxiliary power unit if you had not already done, say, an after treatment exhaust retrofit, because that's essentially not really assisting in the emissions benefits of any of the projects. So what you can do is either you can get the whole thing redone, you can get emissions retrofit, that helps with the emission systems with an APU. So those things can be done in tandem, but you can't really do the APU without the original emissions retrofit. And usually these are on things, these are on older vehicles, right, that don't have these, probably 2007, 2005 vehicles that don't already have the emissions controls in the engine. And sometimes we'll find these in off-road vehicles. But but they aren't these components weren't put onto an engine until really 2008, 2009, something like that. So they're going to be vehicles that are already older. They're going to be vehicles that have never previously had a retrofit. But if they have had a retrofit, only then would you be eligible for something like an APU. I'm not sure if I made a lot of sense there, but I hope so.
Okay, so we got another question here. Does company enrollment into environmental projects or programs such as Green Marine and potentially utilizing fleet updates weigh into one of the bonus categories?
Um, so that's something that you would likely cite in your essays, where we ask you, what is your company? There's a part of the question that asks like how your company is participating in ensuring sustainability in the future or something like that. So that's where you would put that and indicate that that this project is part of a vision or a fleet turnover or something like that. And so that's actually one of the basic requirements of these grants. So it would weigh in it would weigh your project more heavily because you are already invested in contributing to these transitions. As far as actual bonus points, I don't know if we have any specific criteria. It may be something that falls under the co-benefits section.
Okay, so that seems to be all the questions we have. Unless somebody else has one that they want to get in really quick. So I would like to once again thank everybody for coming out, making time to join us today. Thank you again for your patience with any difficulties we had this morning. And so we have all of our contact information in the slides. The slides will be posted to the website at a future date, not too far from now. So once again, thank you everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday.
And we'll also be making a copy of the recording of this webinar available on the website. Once that is on the website, we'll send an email out to all the participants of the webinar to notify you that the webinar is available to watch on the website. And thank you as well for attending. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to email one of us and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, everybody.